So to begin our session today on leading organizations in uncertain times, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional lands of the Kosapsan and the Lekwungen families upon which Royal Roads University resides, and that we have the privilege to live, work, learn, and play. And also recognizing our virtual reality, I want to acknowledge the lands and peoples wherever you may be. And if you don't know, there's actually a map, native-land.ca, that you could check on as well to sort of see where the lands are that you are upon. And at Royal Roads, we begin our meetings, our presentations, or events with this sign of respect. And we do it to acknowledge the rich history of these lands and families. And as I said, my name is Kathy Bishop, and along with my colleague, Marilyn Taylor, we are faculty in the School of Leadership Studies. Selena is our education advisor colleague in branding, marketing, and recruitment. And I also want to acknowledge that we have Dr. Catherine Edmansky, who's the director of our School of Leadership, also is on the call. And I also see in the participant list that there's other people, like other people within the university, like Rhonda and beyond. So it's wonderful to see who's here. And I really welcome you to our session today. And so in terms of today's session, it will begin with an overview, and then we're going to go on to our leading organizations in uncertain times, presentation and dialogue. We're also going to speak to the why and what of leadership education, and then we're going to wrap up and close by 1 o'clock. And so again, to start, a real heartfelt welcome to you all in these extraordinary times that we find ourselves in. You know, a time that's true to our school's vision of leading with imagination, courage, and capability. You know, we're really in a part of history that's in the making, and all of us really need to step up, living our learning, our leadership as things emerge. And I just want to let you know that Royal Roads University is launching a new MA in leadership with an executive leadership specialization this upcoming spring. And it is tailored to a COVID and a post-COVID world, which really requires transformational, values-based leadership on the higher level leadership qualities that truly transform organizations in the face of adversity and uncertainty. So I'm the program head, and Marilyn is the founder of the Graduate Certificate in Values-Based Leadership, which also serves as its first term. And we're working collaboratively on providing this unique and effective executive leadership specialization, along with an amazing advisory committee and a whole host of others, too long to name at this point. And then I'll be offering more on the executive leadership towards the end of the session when we speak to the why and what of leadership education. But our intention today really is for everyone to leave with some kind of insights that may help you as you're dealing with what you're currently amidst. Potentially make some more connections with others, and also understand more about a degree program suitable for these times. So it was Whitnower who identified a mythology of the Western world, what he deemed genius without learning. And that's that false notion that genius does not need study, exposure to work of others, or to craftsmanship. Well, it does. And often employees are promoted to mid-level to senior level leadership positions because they're effective in their technical or professional roles. And when they take on these new leadership roles, they're often unprepared for what awaits them or how to navigate the human side of organizational life. And it's clear that different capabilities are needed for organizations wide around responsibilities that involve purpose, vision, mission, values, and action, and engagement. And this is amplified in uncertain times. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Marilyn, to talk more about the context of leading in an uncertain world. Marilyn?
Thank you, Kathy. And hello, everybody. Welcome to Royal Roads Virtual. We have a special opportunity now. When we want to think about leading in uncertain times, we are indeed in uncertain times. We are in a time of COVID-19, a pandemic which is probably the worst in memorable history, and even worse than the the earlier flus, because it is transmitted without symptoms, which makes it very complex. And of course, we've all been in it. That's the bad news. The good news is we have a perfect example of uncertainty, of heightened uncertainty, to really think about what is leadership and what is leadership in uncertain times. In fact, the 21st century has been pretty uncertain, and that's a shift in the world from when perhaps in the mid to late 20th century, change didn't happen that quickly. And so we could have, 5-year strategic plans with goals and expect to deliver on them. But we live in a different context, and therefore it makes a huge change to what we as leaders need to be able to do. And here is a picture of Canada as of Monday. Basically in the world, this is astonishing. Think about this time last year, 28th of October, 2019. Would you have had any idea that this was going to happen? 44 million people globally, and 220,000 in Canada have contracted a disease, this virus. And it can be, especially with some populations, especially deadly. So it's killed already 1.1 million people on the earth, and in Canada, about 10,000 people. And counting, of course, because as you see, we're in a surge, as most nations are. Kathy, could you flip the next one? What does it mean? Well, I pulled a bunch of headlines off our newspapers, and it means that it affects the economy. Small businesses are being decimated, and people are losing jobs. Small class sizes in schools, like schools have had to change their whole approach. I can tell you at Royal Roads, we're entirely virtual and expect to be for about another year. And people with certain people are disproportionately affected, especially those who are somewhat disadvantaged, either economically or through comorbidities and disabilities. Every sector has been touched. Banks are, and large organizations are having to rethink how do they keep their employees, especially women have been especially affected by this, because they're also typically the primary caregivers. So what does this, we have an example. So this is our example. Can you flip it next? Some of you will have heard of VUCA environments. It's really about being volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So let's have a look at what that means. Maybe how many of you are familiar with this? Just put up, do your, okay. So let me explain just briefly. So what does it mean to be a complex? It means that many parts are connected to others. So for example, in the pandemic, we can see that there are interrelated aspects of society that are affecting each other: public health, government, legal system, protective services, our economy itself, education systems, our food supply, and transportation. I'm trying to figure out how to get somewhere by a plane, and it's not an easy task. So that's without even mentioning hockey. So that means that something happens in one part of a system and it affects the others. And they all operate together. Then the whole thing, what do we mean by volatile? Volatile is when, although we know something, a lot about something, we don't know when it's going to happen or how long it will last. So an example of that was, we know a lot about the stock market, about what drives it up or down, but we really don't know how it, how long it will be going in one direction or another, because there's some totally different variables. Now, ambiguous means that although there are causal relationships, the causal relationships, one thing causes another, but we don't know how. We don't also, so basically we're saying we're operating in an environment where most of what we're dealing with are unknowns. And an example of that would be, you know, what are some of the ways that we're living now in COVID? What are they going to leave for us going forward, even after we're able to emerge a little bit more securely into the world? So if some people are saying we've got good at working at home, maybe many of us will do a lot of work at home. What will that mean to commercial real estate, for example? We don't know. That's ambiguity. Uncertainty specifically is where you can, where still unknowns, but the event's basic cause and effect are unknown, and change is possible, but not a given. So an example of that would be, we may be able to come up with a vaccine for the virus, but we really don't know whether or not it will mutate further. Remember, this virus is also related to SARS. So so we know lots about viruses, but we actually don't know what it's going to do. So there's uncertainty. Those are terms that have grown up over the last about 15 or 20 years. And well, as long as we've been in the 21st century, pretty much, a little bit before, around the different way in which we are, different environment that we're in. And COVID this pandemic is an example, just one example of that. Over to you, Kathy.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Marilyn, because, you know, it's really important for us to recognize what's happening in the larger world. And then that also drills down to, you know, our organizations and ourselves in context and what's happening. So, you know, one of the things that we recognize is that organizations that operate well in VUCA environments have ecosystems that they operate as ecosystems, as opposed to, say, that machine-like, or this is the way we used to do it kind of way of being, where members are empowered to learn and innovate, where there's a shared mission and some core values that those serve as a platform for initiatives, and that also that there's a lot of acting and observing and adjusting to move forward as opportunities emerge. And so I'd like to share just a little bit, real quickly, you know, a story from my own personal experience, you know, because when COVID was declared back in the spring, we began mobilizing to move our Masters of Arts in Leadership multi-sectorial program, its 2-week residency experience, into the online format. And this was a time where we were all flying into the unknown. And in fact, even though it was declared, we were already still thinking about it even before it was declared. In fact, I had the team lead of one of the residencies, you know, contact me before saying, you know what, Kathy, I know this is coming down. We should really start thinking about what's going on, because this is the first time it ever happened. And so what was great about this was how we were able to then move with what was and is and future becoming. And so in terms of looking at some of those operations as an ecosystems where members were empowered to learn and innovate, one certain example was the way our programs is set up and our Moodle shell platform is, as program head, I can make changes, or our program coordinator, Lila now, can make changes, but nobody else can. And there's a reasoning behind that. However, all that reasoning shifted with COVID. And in the beginning, although I was part of those processes in terms of, okay, I'll help make changes, all of a sudden, my being there became an impediment. And so part of empowering members to sort of innovate and to learn as we're going forward was one of the things that we did was remove that that directive or that policy where I and the program coordinator were the only ones who were able to make changes within the Moodle shell and then disperse that off to the team lead so that they could quickly and easily adapt and move in terms of those pieces. So there are many different examples in that, but just to give you that one and to move on around our shared mission and core values that served as platforms. You know, one of the things that we really discussed both in our Res 1 teams and our Res 2 teams was around, you know, how do we come together more as a team in these intensive times? You know, how can we still create a meaningful online residency experience, recognizing that that we have to do it differently, but we can still meet our learning goals. And so really, what does leadership look like in our current reality? And as we did that, it wasn't just our team, it all, you know, rippled outward. So we had full support of Dr. Catherine Amansky, who's our school director, you know, and it just rippled out into the university as well, that the system was really working as an ecosystem where people were connected and moving with what is. In terms of some of the values that emerged afterwards, you know, we definitely checked in and kept on track both pre, during, and post all of this. But some of the values that emerged as we talked with our team were things like transparency, building community, compassion, gratitude, fun, and joy. Many different ones. And then in terms of acting, observing, adjusting to moving forward as opportunities emerged, we really looked and saw that we were collaborative leadership in action, where it really was that collaboration where all hands were on deck. There was increased communication and collaboration with faculty and staff. We really pulled together in terms of having transparent communications on all fronts. We were hosting meetings with ourselves, but with students, and really looking at a creation of new resources. And so different resources came out of it. And so really it came down to us understanding what does this reality require of us here and now, rather than trying to fit it into our structures that existed before. And so for me, one of the theories and work that I find quite useful was back in 2014, John Cotter identified the need for dual operating systems within organizations in a faster moving world. And that's where he identified both the need for a hierarchy and networks. And so looking at how do those work in tandem? So with a hierarchy, sort of the focus is on what you know and what you currently do well, whereas a network focuses on where you want to go in the future. And you can see by this diagram of Cotter's that the hierarchy is the one that is in the forefront, and there's different people that then are moved out into a network, into sort of networks where they can create and innovate with both the authority but also resources to move with the times. So it's almost in some ways the best of both worlds. And it's really about looking at how do we adapt as we go along. And right now we know we're in a time of transition, and maybe in 50 years, we won't have hierarchy, but right now we do have that while we're working in our organizations. And yet we're finding that we need more and starting to see much more as those ecosystems and being an adaptive organization like real living system. And so at this point, we invite you to consider adaptations in your own organizations that happened as a result of COVID. And before we kind of move into small group dialogues, I just want to ask, Marilyn, is there anything more that you would like to add at this point, just before we talk more in terms of having people in their breakout rooms?
just maybe that when we can operate, the hierarchies used to be about procedures and practices and policies. And we still need those, but those are not helpful when you're in a completely evolving situation. And so what we do is we go beneath those and say, what are the values, core values that drive those that we share? And what is it we're all working for? What's the mission, as Kathy mentioned, but also carrying that, it's a layer of organization that goes beneath the structures. And that's what makes networks work. It's not just because we show up in different groups. It's because we are in the group that we need to be in order to deliver on the mission in this particular time. And we know we can trust each other to function according to our agreed values.
Thanks, Meryl. Wonderful. And sort of building on that, one of the things that we recognize, leadership is engagement, it's a principle in our school, is that there's a wealth of knowledge, wisdom, experience right here in this group. And this is why we're going to, in a moment, give an opportunity for you to connect deeper with others, and we'll bring it back to the larger group as well, to really sort of link some of your own experiences, your own wisdom, some of the theory, the practice, moving forward. And so we are going to, ask you to look deeper at the question of, where was a successful adaptation in your own organization, and where might it happen to potentially better? So that's the dialogue we're going to invite you to engage in. And in a moment, we'll be putting people randomly in groups of 3 or 4. And we really invite you to sort of take that time to share about that. And then also you'll see that we've put together a collective Google document that we also invite you to sort of add to it so that we can start highlighting ideas and actions around what helps successful adaptations and what gets in the way. And so the collective document link has been sent to you, but I believe Selena's also going to put it in the chat box again so that you can access it there. And then I just want to sort of say that also, if you're not really feeling that you want to chat with anyone at this point too, which sometimes happens, maybe you might be in the midst of lunch, or maybe you're just feeling like, this is something I just want to sit with. I don't often have much time for myself to sit and really think this through. You do have another option. You can choose not to click on join a breakout room, or if for somehow you get placed in a breakout room, you can still choose to come back to the main room. So you can stay in the main room, and you can also take time to reflect on your own and add to the Google document. And then in about 6 to 8 minutes, we'll come back, all of us, to have a bit more of a dialogue and to go further in terms of our discussion around what leaders need to do in these times. So at this point, if for some reason you get bounced off the webinar, Selena will let you back in. You can see her email address is there, but it's also in your reminder email, so you can just sort of go. And then I see Marilyn, would you like something to add in?
Yeah, just that if you keep your adaptations to those for COVID, we'll be all kind of working on the same page. And the second thing is that with the Google Doc, Kathy and I will summarize the Google Doc and put it up for available to you as well.
Wonderful, thank you, Marilyn. Good, so then at this point, Selena, I'm gonna invite you to put people into breakout rooms, and you'll see join breakout room. Join if you want. If not, you can also stay here, and Selena will make sure there's enough people in groups that want to be in groups. And look forward to seeing you back here about probably around 12:40, 12:41. Great, enjoy your conversations. Well, welcome back to you all. I hope you had some engaging, lively dialogues. It was, looking at the Google Doc, you can see that there's, a variety of points that people have included, and you can sort of even pull out some of the the comments that were made. And as Marilyn said, we'll do more of this too, and we'll have that PDF document for you as well as the video will be summarized. But what you can see as we move forward, that it really is the leader's job in uncertain and complex environments to optimize trust in the environment. And this can be done in lots of different ways. I mean, part of, you know, what was brought up on the Google Doc was around, you know, communication and people feeling, you know, in the know of what's going on. And there's also things about walking the talk. But you also need to look at engaging people in problem solving and amplifying the communication in all different directions. And then also really look at real collaboration. So it's not just simply, you know, some leader telling people what to do. That's a real command and control mode of leadership. And what we know is that style doesn't always work. Sometimes it works and sometimes it's appropriate. And part of discerning when it's necessary and when it might be appropriate is by taking a look at some of our leaders and the leaderships of leader and the leadership situations that happen. But it really is outside in the outside world, but it really is a question of what does real collaboration look like, what does engaging people, and what does optimizing trust really look like, because we know that's what really propels leaders and their organizations. And often leaders are tempted to fall back to look at facts rather than allowing for those patterns to emerge. And they also have this desire for an accelerated resolution of problems or exploitation of opportunities, rather than saying what's currently going on, how can we move, again, like an ecosystem, with what's happening, and how will our purpose and our mission and our values move that forward. So, you know, for me, a great example is within our, again, Royal Roads University, and as I think deeply, and as Marilyn and I have talked about, you know, our own context, we have a new president, Dr. Philip Steenkamp, and he really epitomizes outstanding organizational leadership, definitely in certain times. You know, as an employee in this organization, he's been clear. He speaks to, you know, our new vision. He's offered values, our values of caring and courage and creativity, and those values in action. You know, that right off the bat, there was a discussion that people are safe, they're protected, no one will lose their job, and that the whole organization needs to adapt around how we're going to deliver on our programs and finding new ways to do it. And then also having new or the right policy and protocols in place along with that ongoing communication. You know, and ultimately in these times, it really does take courage for us all to step up and step in. As you know, as the Google Doc mentioned, there is that whole piece just around the emotions that might surface as well with people. So to be able as leaders to not be blown off the path, but to be able to walk it in a good way. You know, as we take time to reflect our leadership in our own organizations, I think we can also, in these times, take a look at leadership that's playing out on the global stage. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Marilyn to, again, as we move from the internal to the external back and forth, pass it back to you, Marilyn. And if you want to add anything to what I've said before you begin, I won't change the slide until you let me know. And you're muted, Marilyn?
Perfect. Go ahead.
Right.
So we have the gift of our terrible time is that we can all see people dealing with, leaders dealing with the same challenge, and we can see how they're doing. So in light of what we've been talking about, let's look at some of the data. These were the the trends in the countries that have lost the most or have the greatest infection rate. Leading them all, the United States of America, India, Brazil, and Russia. What do we know about the leaders of those current leaders of those countries, and how they come across as leaders? We're talking about Donald Trump. We're talking about Modi. We're talking about how do you say the Peruvians or the Brazilians' name? Anyway, the leader of Brazil, and of course Putin. My impression is, and probably most people would agree, that some of these are democracies, but the leaders are very, very authority oriented, top down. Let me say that you could say, well, these are also large countries. Of course, they would lose more people. But let me give you some data about that per 100,000 rate. So for 100,000 population, the rate in the US is over 73,000. In India, over 48,000. That's equal numbers of people and infection rate for equal 100,000. Brazil, close to 24,000. Russia, over 16,000. Canada, remember, it's the same rate, per 100,000, 2,742.7 people. So there's a vast difference in the results of, and this is a complex thing. I don't want to oversimplify it. I think what we could say is we have some firm grounds to create some hypotheses here, to ask some very important questions, to look further into. So the next one, Kathy. This article appeared in Forbes, which is an American business magazine or journal or publication. And it appeared in April. The last data were all from this week. In April, this appeared. So what do these have in common? Well, we don't want to say exactly that. Forbes was saying women seem to be doing better. And in the article, there were 4 things that were mentioned about these people. One was they told the truth. So example, from Angela Merkel, Germany jumped right in over the phases of denial and anger and disingenuousness. The country's numbers are far below its European neighbors. And to tell you the truth, if you look on, the electronic journals, or New York Times, for example, you'll see that today there's a huge upswing in Europe, and Angela Merkel and Germany is up, but it's not up as much as France, Spain, Italy, whatever. The other thing was decisiveness. Early and complete measures to contain the spread. Not this cover up we're not going to test because it'll only prove that we're not working well. And the third one was testing. So there were, for example, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand immediately closed all public places where you could contract and so all of these women did those same things, these leaders. The other one, and then tech, absolutely massive uses of tech and testing and tracking. Finally, this may be surprising in an American business magazine, love. Generally, the empathy and care, this is a quote, which all these female leaders communicated seems to come from an alternate universe to the one we're most, that we've gotten used to. The issue here is that real success comes from everybody, and this would be true in an organization, we think, that self-motivated behavior is way more effective and productive than coerced behavior. There will always be a small number of people who may need to have a fine to keep a mask on in the right place, but the most of the population, and we will all tend to make a good representation of ourselves if we feel that our interests are being cared for in the way that the system's working. Go ahead, Kathy. Okay, so that is, I think that part of what I was saying there was why we're doing this type of leadership education. We're in a very different time. Even when the pandemic's over, we expect an uncertain environment. We also know that people are well educated more than ever before, and that's true across the world. And we're also in more communication to one another. So this whole thing that some people have more information than others, partly true, but not entirely true. So we're working to create, working to learn leadership and organizational change that is based on in engaging people in their own voluntary ways. Over to you, my colleague, Kathy.
Thanks, Marilyn. As we're coming in, 4 minutes to go, as we're, moving into it. So, wow, here we are. It's, it's a quick dialogue and discussion in terms of leading organizations in uncertain times. But, we just wanted to recognize that we have developed a program, a specialization. Without a doubt, Royal Roads' reputation as a change-making, innovative institution that serves mid-career and senior professionals allows us to offer an executive leadership program born out of direct experience, working with and engaging leaders for over 25 years. And, ultimately, within this program, we're looking to ensure that anyone leaves, with that solid leadership system inside, navigating the world, that they're solid and they're confident, and that they're able to create those shared cultures and shared missions that guide the organization and teams within turbulent times. And so that even though environments are turbulent, we can stand solid in terms of our own leadership and how we're guided. And in this program, it's a 2-year program. It is a blended, although we may have to at times navigate it as fully online, depending on what COVID shows us. It incorporates 2 residencies. There's also 9 units of electives and a capstone really around leading organization change, where you really put your theory into practice and test and try out different things while you're working with an organization. And the first term of it is the graduate certificate in values-based leadership. And that all adds up into it. So you can check out our website if you're interested in more details. There's definitely more information there. The next upcoming intakes are April of 2021. The application deadline's in January. There's also then the next one following that is in April 18th, 2022. Again, all on our website. And through there, you can contact your enrollment advisors. There's also international admissions and registration. And then, of course, you have our School of Leadership Studies. And Marilyn and myself are more than happy to talk and connect with you, further in terms of any needs that you may have, anything that potentially this has, arisen for you. At this point, we've got about a minute and a half before we say goodbye with a final wrap up. And I'm just wondering if there's any questions in the chat box. I can't see it at this point. If there's anything that at this point in the last minute that we might want to surface before we actually close our webinar for today.
I think that we've got some lovely greetings and some notes that suggest we'll be hearing from some of you. Tara's hands up.
Tara.
I was just clapping to say thank you.
Oh, oh, that's a clap. Okay. Well,
Well, thank you.
It's great seeing your faces, and hopefully we'll see more of you and engage more with you going forward.
Lovely. And just, to give a big shout out and thank you to each and every one of you, that, leadership at times is really tough. And it really is about how we stay connected and continue to look at how we can be forces for good in the world. So, please stay in touch. If you need to know anything else, Selena will send out a follow-up to this. And then you can also check out our blog. If the Leading in Organizations blog is what attracted you and brought you there, great. Happy to have more conversations about that. Or if you want to see it, you can also check it there. School of Leadership Studies has a variety of different blogs, and we have a variety of different programs. So we really do invite, and a variety of upcoming different webinars, from, ranging from, health to global leadership to a whole variety. So, please do keep in touch. Please, Bonnie Henry comes to mind, stay safe, be calm
And be
and
calm
be kind,
and
of
be
course.